Okay, thank you, Leo. So hi everyone, welcome to our Argo CD and rollout contributors meeting. First of all, thanks Andre and Leo for being on triage this week. Are there any volunteers for triage for next week?
I can do primary.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Anyone else for secondary for the upcoming week?
I can do secondary.
Thank you, Ryan. Okay. This is great. Okay, so for our stats, thanks everyone who reviewed and merged PRs this week. I see that probably we have maybe a record of more PRs being closed than opened, which is great. So thanks everyone who contributed to this. And let's start with our topics for from triage. I see that there are quite a few. Andre?
Yeah. So
would-
I think like Leo added one, and then like I added some and I filtered some. So like for those which were, it's not like something broken. I just like removed it from the list for now, and like left it in the like Slack post. But for these, it's like cases when something seems like actively like broken. And I wonder what's the best way. Like, should we just like take 2 minutes to go through like for every issue and try to go through it, or should we like just move it offline?
I would say that if there are issues that you recognize are as particularly critical, I'd say maybe pick one or two such and go over them right now and maybe.
Okay, sounds good. Let's go through like first two from the list. Like first two is actually like we really need to find some fix. It's basically like after I upgraded some Redis versions, apparently like upstream changes like some of the CRDs to not auto mount service account, which may be like legit for certain like like environments like with Kyverno. So I wonder just what's the best course of action, because we can just override it in our overlays to just get back to a previous behavior, or we can like try to mount service account token manually.
So this started happening after the recent upgrade to Redis?
Yes. So like in specifically like, yeah, I think it's a HA proxy, and I think it's really, yeah, I think it's that thing where like just generated manifest from upstream, I believe. Maybe I'm missing something, but yeah, this like looks like something we need to like decide what to do with this option.
I'd like to know why it needs a service account token. Also, this doesn't really make sense. So they say they're using Argo CD version 2.14.2.
Yeah, now that I think of it, it's actually a bit weird because like it maybe they like copied manifest from master or something, or like the CRDs, etc. Yeah, I'm not sure. Probably
Oh,
requires more like questions. Okay, let's follow up probably later then.
auto mount service account token has been false for 4 years. This is a different, something else is the issue.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah. Okay, let's go to the next one. I will reply on that.
Okay. The second one, Andre?
Yes, the second one.
Okay.
Basically, I think it's related to like having destination name. So apparently it's sometimes like auto-populated, and then there are some intermittent issues with like some auto updates, like kind of failing or something. Name and server code, so the application cannot have both name and server defined. Um, yeah. So this is like pretty somewhat specific. Uh, yeah.
Intermittent problem. Okay. I think that I think that the question is whether this is reproducible. First of all,
Mhm.
whether we produce this. I think that from the description, I think it's pretty difficult to tell what the root cause is.
I see.
So I
Yeah, it
suggest
looks
maybe
like destination name gets like auto added to the manifest.
By
Um,
what? Looking at Kubernetes audit logs would be helpful so we could tell,
mm,
did the controller add
mhm,
this, API server, something else?
mhm, mhm.
It looks like it's been broken because of the inference, server inference code.
Maybe. Well, this is 2.14.2. Sure, there was a change in 2.14.2 which added inference for the server name. So I'd be curious if 2.13 can't reproduce this. But in 3.0, we clawed out all of the inference code in favor of better code, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Mm.
So maybe this
Uh,
problem just goes away.
I also saw a UI PR that was based on what field was populated, was emptying out the other value with like a toggle. So in the UI code, so that might be that PR that's the problem.
Andrew,
Mm.
you're facing this issue locally, I mean internally in
I
your
haven't seen it myself.
okay.
Uh, so yeah, it's the first time I saw like person report something like this. Um, yeah, but I'm already using build from like latest master pretty much, so it's probably not an issue anymore.
yes, I think it would be interesting to see whether this reproduces on the 2.14.2 version and then compare with how it behaves on the latest one.
I see. Yeah, that's like basically somebody opened a discussion. I opened this like issue based on discussion. Um, yeah. So let's see. Like I'll just ask a person to try to reproduce on master. Yeah.
Okay, so I suggest that we continue with other items and then we have more time. We can go back to additional, unless there is something critical, additional critical, Andre, here?
I don't think there is something like really critical, like a big regression or something, but like I guess we still like ideally need to like help people out. I just like wasn't familiar with specific areas like of this, and I probably would be too slow to dig into like each issue. So like basically, let's do this. I would encourage like if something like this looks familiar to like or like to the area you're working on and have expertise with, please chime in and like try to like look and triage this. I think it's maybe the best approach.
Yeah, I think, yeah, we should try to treat it offline. Great. Thanks, Andre.
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay. Leo, you have an item.
Yeah, from the issues that were open last week, this is the one that, stood up for me. It was opened by Ryan, and apparently there's an issue. I mean, we don't have to discuss or try to find a solution to that. I'm mainly curious to understand what is going on there and why that started to happen at 2:14. Um, But yeah, I'm mainly curious about this one. It looks the thing is apparently on 2.14, Argo City API server starts crashing a lot more than before. We are running 2.13 internally, and we're not facing restarts in API server. I just looked this morning and I haven't noticed anything like that. So this is quite serious if that started to happen in 2.14. So I'm just raising this up
Yeah,
here.
what I've observed, and I don't have a lot of data to back it up, is with there was two things that I think we toggled in 2.14 that started probably just exacerbating the existing problems. One was, or the biggest one is for the AppSec controller, you can now configure the Kubernetes client-side throttling, and we bumped those up to much higher values. So I think we are just processing way more application sets and applications than we were previously. Like our queues are actually hitting zero now. And that is triggering some of the race conditions essentially here. So I found a few of these already and patched some where anytime that an informer or really anything from the Kubernetes SDK returns back an object, you have to treat that object as read only. And specifically in the server, we manipulate those objects a lot. And what can happen is because it's a pointer, you're concurrently changing, like in this case, I think it's changing the labels or something on it. So whenever those two concurrent things happen, it causes a panic. So I previously went through and added a bunch of .deep copies everywhere, and uh, as I was doing that, I think I realized that's probably not the best solution. And I think Michael left a comment too, like, yeah, maybe we shouldn't just sprinkle deep copies everywhere. So I submitted a PR to wrap two of the client set and an informer to always return deep copies. I haven't tried this out in our own local or our own cluster, but I did try out the patch where I was sprinkling deep copies everywhere, and that made it extremely better. Like I've only seen it crash because of the concurrent changes once in the last 2 days. So I don't think 2.14 is actually causing any issues. I think us bumping up or removing rather the client side throttling is just making these race conditions happen more frequently.
Got it.
So
And did you had a chance to understand why the panic happens? I understood everything you said, just the panic is not 100% clear to me why that actually happens.
Yeah, so it looks like the informers keep like an in-memory cache of these objects. So like applications is really the biggest offender in this case. And whenever you ask an informer for an object, it returns to you like a pointer to that application. And whenever you change that, like by trying to send it over like a proto buff or something, returning it back as part of the Argo servers watches or whatever we may be doing. If we're changing labels in one Go routine, but then trying to write it to write it to the wire in another, it causes it to panic. It was kind of hard to figure out what was going on because the stack traces don't really give you the full picture. It only gives you where it's writing it to the wire, as opposed to like what the other thread was doing to cause this to happen. So what I ended up doing was taking all of the thread dumps and some of the other issues I've created for this shed some better light into it. But you can see two Go routines, one manipulating the application object, and the other one trying to write it to respond to a request, and that's where the issue happened. I actually have a test case that can reproduce this pretty reliably that I can share as well. It's merged in, but that's how I originally stumbled across this.
so are you saying that like I know that in the Argo City server we use so we use the listers, and like when we retrieve, like when we get an application resource, we get it out of the informers cache, right? And you're saying that basically the get function for this will return a pointer to the resource in the cache and not a copy, and that's the issue.
Correct. Yeah. In the Kubernetes docs, if you click that first read only value link there, it explicitly says that you have to treat the objects as read only. I mean,
Interesting.
it's buried in the docs, so don't fault. I only found it because the server was crashing. I would have done the same thing, but that's how I found it.
Yeah, because I was aware of, like, if you like in the informer's handlers, like the create, update, and delete things. I think that was clear that those objects that you get there should be treated as read only. I think but that is also true for the objects that you get out of the cache. That's new to me, but that's a good find. Yeah.
Yeah, I can share two of the other PRs, and the one has the test case that reproduces. If anybody's interested, I'll drop them in the chat. But um, I,
Yeah,
I don't know
thanks.
if this is the best fix with my PR here. It just wraps all of the informers and literally like embeds them, and instead of returning the actual object, just does a dot deep copy to them. Um, Probably will result in more memory, but doesn't lead to panics.
Yeah. I honestly think, yeah, it's a reasonable fix. Sometimes we can probably do something in the middle where, like, if we don't modify the object, we just like can still use read only, but it's like error prone. If we don't modify it now, but we start modifying it in the future, it's like an easy mistake to make, and so that's why this little wrapping seems like probably the best approach to me.
I bounce back and forth on sprinkled versus hammer strategy. Hammer does increase memory out or memory use, so we should keep an eye out and see if that's affected. But also, like, I don't love the idea of every single time we see a panic, we have to go find out where to do a deep copy.
It felt wrong doing dot deep copy
Sure,
everywhere.
fair enough.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. Thank you for working on this.
Thanks, Fran. Thanks, Leo.
So sorry, one more quick item I just want to bring up. So while doing some like maintenance work, I found that there are some libraries from like 5+ years ago which are not really maintained and but used by us. Some of them are pretty simple and not even have external dependencies, but some have like maybe one or two external dependencies. Should we just like replace them, or should we just like create forks in Argo Proj for those repos? I can go in more detail also offline, but just generally wonder like if you thought about this, and like is the idea of creating forks reasonable in general or not really?
My recommendation would be
library?
sorry, go ahead.
No, Andrew, which libraries, for example?
Let me see. I
Listed
created
there?
them.
I think I saw.
I created a separate issue for this. That's okay. Okay, let's get back to this later. I'll link an issue in a bit where they're listed.
Okay. Okay. Thanks, Andrew. Nitish? Is Nitish here? Okay.
I don't see him in the call.
Yeah. Okay, so let's for now move on to the next one. Alex?
Yeah, that was just a reminder, but the PR, thanks for sending the update, Reggie. And the PR are ready for review. I've been working on them this morning, and I also opened a new one to change the compare options. So from ignoring the status fields in for CRD objects to ignore it for all object, and also the value that was ignore resource updates on ignore difference or something like that. So it takes people currently configure ignore differences and will also ignore the updates on them. So the reason behind that is if you ignore some field in the diff, then why generate the diff if that field changed? So yeah, that's a PR that I've just opened right now. So review those, and they're meant for 2.0. So that's it.
Great.
Yeah, I'd
Great.
say I'm pretty supportive of this. Like I've been running Argo CD on like in our company for like more than half a year with like basically these settings to like ignore status for all fields and ignore differences as like resource updates. And I don't know, like it helped to like make it much more performant. And like I didn't see any issues. Yeah.
Okay. Great. Thanks, Alex. Javi? Right? I hope I pronounced it correctly. Javi Solana on the call.
Looks like not.
Okay. Okay, so we had an additional, oh, we actually have two additional items. Harshit?
Yeah, I'm here on the call. I think this was basically an issue. It's been discussed on the PR, but I just wanted to confirm I can continue work on it. It's basically the dry run sync. It updates the last sync status incorrectly, and the metrics don't really have any additional label to indicate if it was a dry run sync. I think the PR has an approval, but there is one more requested change, so that needs to be approved as well by I forgot who created. I think there was, so it needs I think one more approval from someone who requested a change, and then in UI as well. I think there was a discussion that in UI it should show it a bit differently because right now there is no way to know if the last sync that got failed was a dry run sync or an actual sync. So it's a bit misleading there. So there was, I think, a bigger discussion on how it needs to be fixed, but I think there was a suggestion that if we just add another field or something to indicate the last sync was a dry run sync in UI, that should be good enough. And I just wanted to check if that kind of approach is fine, so I can probably contribute to it after that.
So I think, well, let me explain the issue in case I'm wrong about anything. Basically, the idea is when you do a dry run, the Argo CD app controller populates the last sync field in the app status with basically the result of that dry run. And that's problematic for a number of reasons. You lose track of the fact that it was a dry run and not a real sync that actually occurred. You lose information about the last actual sync that occurred. So it's just confusing and strange. One proposed solution was to just add a field to the last sync status field to say, hey, this was a dry run. I don't really like that. I think that having the historical information of the last actual sync on the CR is valuable. I don't think people should have to update all of their notifications logic to exclude changes that have the dry run set to true. I think there should be a dedicated field in the app status for dry run output. And just so everyone's aware, the reason that information goes into the app CR is when you do something like request a dry run sync from the API, the way the API accomplishes that is it asks the app controller for that sync, but it's completely disconnected. Like the API server says, hey, I want to sync. The app controller completely separately goes and does the sync asynchronously. And the only way to communicate the result back up to the API is to put that output somewhere. And today it's put into the same field where the sync output goes. So I think we need a new field, and I think we need CLI UI API updates to use the new dry run output field.
Okay. So I'm a bit new to the code base and the Argo CD itself. To start off, where exactly should we work on it if we were to change off?
The way I would start is by going to types.go. It's under, let me find the location real quick. Package APIs application v1 alpha 1 types.go. That's the directory structure. And in there, you've got all of the types for the application CRD. I'd go to the application status struct and find wherever the last sync object is currently stored, and then just make a new field and call it last drive run sync. Once you do that, run code gen, and it's going to populate a ton of fields in a ton of places for you in the code. And then you can go start trying to find the places that use the old struct in reference to a dry run or in reference to any sync, really, and then change that code to also handle the dry run case. So UI code, CLI code, etc.
Okay.
It's a bit of a fishing expedition, to be honest, but I'm not sure
Okay.
there's a better way.
Yeah, no, I can take a look. Yeah. So basically in types.go we need to search for where the sync result is being stored and there add a new type for dry run and then from there on see how it goes.
Yep, run code gen to make sure that field ends up appearing everywhere else that you're going to need it. And then after that, you should be able to just start writing code to take advantage of the new field.
Okay, I see. Okay. Okay, yeah. There was this suggestion actually on the discussion itself that adding clarifying information whether it was a dry run might be sufficient fix with a relatively light CR code change. Does that I mean because this right now indicates that everything needs to change, like all the API, CRD and everything.
I don't like adding that field because if I'm a code maintainer 2 years from now, trying to figure out how to write code to handle something having to do with the last sync operation, I have to look through the fields in that struct, notice that there's a field that says dry run, and then start reacting to, okay, well, I need to handle case one where it's an actual sync, case two where it's a dry run sync. Or even not a code maintainer, if I'm a notifications trigger author, and I'm trying to write my EXPR or whatever it is to account for that field, it's just a lot less clear than it would be if I were to see, okay, well, there's a field for sync operations and there's a field for dry run sync operations. I think it's well worth the extra code to get that clarity.
Okay. Okay. Cool. Okay, yeah, thanks for the explanation. Yeah, let me start and see if I have any issues. I'll probably post it on the discussion thread. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Harshit. Thank you, Michael. Next issue is moving OpenID Connect to the backend. Jan?
Yes, hello. I was investigating an error with Pixie support in an old version of Argo CD. I didn't realize that this issue had been fixed in a more recent version, but trying to fix it myself, I found that there are two code paths for OpenID Connect. One in the Go code of the server, and one in the UI specifically for the Pixie support. And I don't know what is the original reason for this, but I think that having just one code path in the server brings some benefits. For example, we can use HTTP only cookie to store the tokens. I think it's better. And also, we can have Pixie for OpenID client with secrets. It's something that we cannot do today with the code in the JavaScript, but with the code in the server, we can add Pixie for secret, not public OpenID client, which is a recommended practice. That's why I opened this PR.
Does anyone have comments on that, or knows the history of why this was split between backend and frontend?
Notice this PR. I like this PR. I think I'm in the same boat as a lot of maintainers. I don't know very much at all about auth flows, front end versus back end. So reviewing this is a real challenge. And maybe that means what we really need is just a call where we go through the code together, either me and you or various maintainers, and make sure we understand everything.
Is this person that initially made the support of Pixie was tagged in that PR and was asked about it and has been active on that PR?
I tagged Austin, who introduced some fixes, latest fixes in the front end side, but I don't know who originally added Pixie code.
I don't remember who it is, but it's not. Yes, it's not the same person that you tagged in the
Okay.
PR.
Yep.
We should be able to get blame this. Maybe the UI code probably hasn't changed. There's someone who fixed a bug in Pixie. I guess that's Austin. Yeah, that's Austin. Let me see who had it before them. Okay, 2 years ago, Marvin 9. I'll post the link in Zoom chat. I think Marvin's still active from time to time. Let me tag them. Jan, I'd be down to have like an hour-long call and review this PR with you.
Yeah, okay.
I think that's what it would take. Maybe longer, depending on how confused I get. But if you hit me up via CNCF Slack, we can find a time.
Okay.
Actually, I would love to join this session. So if you can ping me as well.
Okay.
Yeah, just tag us on the Argo's, I guess the Argo contributors channel.
Okay. Thanks,
Let's
Jan.
add
Thanks.
some links when the issue was introduced in the code base. You're muted, Reggie.
Yeah, sorry. Okay. Dan, do you want to talk about MTLS between all services?
Yeah, I just had a question. In the documentation, if I'm reading this, it says basically all of the components should be using gRPC, which is self-signed and encrypted by default. Am I missing anything? Because here it doesn't mention every service. It only mentions repo server, dex server, um, application controller. It doesn't mention like application set controller, for example. So when I read this, I looked at it and I thought, I think that MTLS is just sort of enabled by default across services, but maybe I'm misreading it.
No, it's not enabled by default. So you'll definitely have to set it up, right? Because
Because not everything is using gRPC.
no, well, so what the services right now are doing, I think, is by default they use TLS, but unvalidated, right, and not MTLS.
Oh,
So MTLS is mutual, right? So
yeah.
that's basically one has a client certificate, the other has a service certificate, and they both mutually authenticate. But for that to happen, you usually need infrastructure in place, right? So you need a common certificate authority for which those certificates will be issued. And that's that's not something we provide out of the box. So
If I just go and add the certificates, the persistent certificates here on all these, and then there's like a setting to do strict TLS. Is that all I need to do across all services then?
I don't think it would be possible, like, because it depends on, like, for example, on AWS, you'd probably have another like certificate authority, and like if people using EC or like service mesh with like ambient mode, for example, there's going to be another case. So
Yeah, leave
I don't
service
know.
mesh out of it for the moment.
Okay.
Just if I
well,
was just doing it
what
directly.
you need is like a certificate authority which you use to issue certificates like service certificates and client certificates, and then you have to configure each of the services to know that certificate authority and give all of those services their own certificates that's issued by the CA. We could make it a little bit simpler, I guess, so that like once you have a CA that like maybe stored in a well-known secret, that those services will configure themselves to use that CA for validation. I don't know, but yeah,
Yeah, because right now I guess you would have to add well, I don't even see actually documentation for how to add a CA. I see documentation for how to add certificates.
well, probably because it's out of scope. I don't know.
Yeah, I believe it's usually out of scope.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you've got a good point there. It's pretty complicated to set up properly. So,
Okay. All right. That's helpful. Thank you.
Okay, so I think we covered everything that was written for today. I saw a couple of requests in the chat for some issues. Maybe we have a minute or two to look at those. Nick, is Nick on the call?
Yes. I've posted an issue a while ago. It was also discussed discussed earlier, I think a month ago or something. That's the issue that we're facing when we try to sync our application for the first time. When we how do we say it correctly? When we create namespaces, we have an external webhook that adds permissions to the namespace. So the permission to create service accounts or deployments and all that kind of things. We do this using a package called Capsule. And I saw that another person had the same issue with some solution that's from OpenShift. Is there a question, Mitchell?
Oh, no, sorry. I meant to go after you. Sorry, maybe I shouldn't have
Okay.
used the raise hand. I'll lower that. Sorry about
Okay.
that.
No worries. Sorry. So we need a solution to first create namespaces and afterwards create the resources in the namespace. For CRDs, there's already a solution called skip dry run on missing resource, I think. We would like something similar, but then for namespace creation. So when the namespace isn't there, skip the dry run, just create the namespace first and then do a retry. And I saw in that Crenshaw already replied and like we need some sort of skip dry run solution. And I wasn't sure how to implement this. So I'm willing to help writing a PR to solve this issue, if this is something that you really want. But I'm not really sure if you want to do this by some toggle during the sync or some attribute on the application project, which seems the most logical location for me.
I don't
Are
really
there
like
any?
new flags if we can avoid them. I haven't seen a solution to this problem that I love yet, but I'm curious, what if you put the namespace on an initial sync wave? Does it avoid the initial dry run failure when you do that?
No, we get the same issue.
See, that's
So we use
odd to me.
sync waves,
Yeah.
and the workaround is to create a separate project which creates namespaces,
Huh.
which isn't that pretty, to be honest.
Well, let me be more precise in my question. If you use an
Yeah.
initial sync wave, does the namespace fail to get applied, or does the namespace apply and then the subsequent resources fail?
It doesn't create the namespace, so
Okay. That seems like odd behavior to me. It feels like I had to be able to put something in a sync wave, have Argo CD attempt to apply it regardless of all other resources, and then Argo CD retry the sync if only the namespace worked and there's some gap of time where the other stuff has to be set up, then eventually the sync would work. So rather than skip dry run on missing namespace or any new flag like that, I think we should analyze whether sync waves ought to operate independently or more independently than they do now.
That would be also great. Yeah, and it would solve the issue too. Yeah.
The initial validation is done on all resources independent of waves because you don't want to start the sync and then you're not at, let's say, wave 3 and wave 3 failed the validation and now you failed in the middle of the sync. I think the validation was intended to validate kind of whole the whole sync before starting it and starting syncing resource.
And oddly enough, I think that's precisely the behavior that we need now is that undesired behavior. So that's a flag I think I could get behind.
Or why not just disable that validation if it's known to always fail in that case?
Because I think you want that validation after the initial sync, right?
You can trigger the first thing without that validation and then have that validation forever after.
It gets imperative then. I don't know. A per wave dry run feels more declarative and fine to me if it's not a crazy amount of code. It allows intentional failures, which we disallow today. And I think, like, if you watch Victor's, why Argo CD sync model is broken YouTube video, I think this would be an example of coming more into line with what Victor had in mind there. Victor Farsick. I couldn't remember his last name at the moment. That Victor.
Okay. So no new toggles, but fix the sync.
Or provide a mode. I think it is a toggle, but it is provide a per wave dry run mode that you can opt into for operations where you know subsequent waves are going to fail or are likely to fail.
This, even if you have a per wave dry run, it ends up disabling the initial behavior to validate everything before a sync just for the first attempt. So you have the same kind of problem where the first sync needs a different set of sync config than the syncs after that.
You don't completely lose protection. If you have sync 1 that's just a namespace and then sync 2 that's 50 different resources, you still get protection from partial syncs on wave 2 by the dry run. So there's still value in enabling dry run there.
Yeah, there's just a small caveat.
Yep. Either way, it requires more discussion, I think, which can probably happen on CNCF Slack.
Okay. So for now, it's best for me to just wait until there's a conclusion.
I think start a thread in the Argo contributors channel on Slack.
Okay.
And then Alex and I can bounce ideas back and forth a little bit more. And if we come to a consensus, then we'll hopefully have a direction for coding.
Okay, very good. Thank you. I will do.
Cool.
And thank you all for your time.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Michael and Alex, and thanks everyone. And see you next week.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I have a question.
Bye-bye.
If